So I don't, I could talk about my love for you for a long time, but I'd rather you do the talking.
Terrific. So, Brother Jonas, just give me a time limit. I'm from the East. I just talk and talk and talk and talk till somebody starts to snore. So I'll be hospitable and stop at the right time.
Yes.
Give me a time limit so I'll speak more compassionately. I'll stop, and then in that period, I can also request question answer.
Yes.
Okay. Terrific. Okay, so shall I start?
Hold on one second. I'm bringing more folks in.
Oh, yeah. Please.
And as I mentioned in the email to you, this 30, 40 minutes is all yours. I have no expectations except for you to be yourself.
Terrific.
It's a wonderful gift.
But if I was wise, then I would just, in these 30, 40 minutes, be completely silent then.
Yes. Well, don't do that.
Okay. So about 30 to 40 minutes, about say 40 minutes, then you're saying, with including question and answer.
Yes.
Okay, terrific. You just give me the cue when to start, and I'll start at that time.
Okay. I should add something. I think I mentioned in the email, but we usually start with a little silence.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
And I'd like to start with maybe 5-7 minutes, something like that, of silence. Just
absolutely.
We can all settle into our bodies and our hearts. And I wonder if you want to lead us in that silence. I have the bell. We still have the bell.
So when you say, so is it, should I do a guided meditation? Like, should I do a Sufi heart meditation?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So before I start, I just want to mention a few words that Rumi, I believe you know Rumi, 13th century sage, what he says about silence. Rumi says, silence is not the absence of sound. It is not the absence of sound. It is the absence of the little self. I, me. That's one thing. And then Rumi says, of course, in Islam, we talk a lot about God. Silence is the language of God. Everything else is a poor translation. So silence is the language of God. Everything else is a poor translation. And lastly, he says, therefore, Jamal, be silent. Be silent so that the Lord who gave you language may speak. For as God fashioned a door and a lock, she also made a key. Okay, so with that, I'll request all of us, and I'll lead you through my favorite Sufi meditation. It's guided. It's called heart meditation. So just closing your eyes and becoming still as best as possible, and then focusing on the nostril and just being present with the breath as we inhale and as we exhale, just this much. Breathing in and breathing out for a few moments. And now, letting go of this, but eyes still closed, please bring attention to the physical heart. Our heart has been yearning, aching, thirsting to connect with us. If it works for you, please take one hand or even both hands and put it over the heart, but feel the heart and touch the heart with the consciousness of the palm of the hand, bonding, feeling, sensing the heart. And for now, becoming aware of the beat, of the rhythm of the heart, connecting with the beat of the heart. And then through the heart, listening to this beautiful revelation that came to the Prophet Muhammad in a dream, where Spirit, Divinity says to each one of us, beloved one, says Spirit, I cannot be contained in the space of the earth. I cannot be contained in the space of the heavens, but I can be contained in the space of the pure, loving heart. So just being with that mystery, that divine heart is inside human heart. The space of the heart is actually boundless, infinite. For a few moments, becoming aware of this astonishing mystery. And now, the Quran says, to Allah, to God, to the God of all of humanity, belong the most beautiful names. So this part requests us to please plant words of beauty inside this boundless, infinite space. The mystics in Islam, they suggest words like, I love you, but with feeling, with sincerity, and no matter how awkward it feels initially, unabashedly, planting these words inside this boundless space, I love you, I really love you. And you can add, thank you, I am so grateful. And you can continue if it's necessary. Please help me. Please help me. I need help. Please help me. I surrender to you. And anything else you want to say. I love you. I love you. I really love you. Or please help me to love you. Thank you. I am so grateful. Please help me. I need help. So I'll be quiet and unabashedly saying those words again and again and again and again. One can never overdo this. And as you keep saying those words, a most beautiful, divine vibration filled with love, filled with blessings, is going from the tongue into the mouth, into the throat, deep into the heart, into the chest, into the heart, deep inside the heart, and then even deeper into what is called the hidden, and then into the hidden of the hidden, astonishingly loving us, blessing us, healing us, empowering us. And now stop saying anything at all, just become very still, cradling the heart. And I'll do a mystical chant about compassion. Oh God, you're boundlessly compassionate, infinitely merciful. It's the most popular mantra, you might say, in Islamic mysticism. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. La ilaha illallahu. La ilaha illallahu. And gently opening your eyes when you're ready. So thank you, my friends. That was the heart meditation. And now I'd like to say a few words in two parts. Maybe I'll talk a little bit about Islam and then a little bit about the work I do in our house of worship here. And then I also work ever since 9/11, ever since my hair was black, with a rabbi and a Christian pastor. And we are called the Interfaith Amigos. And we travel the country and we have written 3 books together. about interfaith, about interspirituality. And I'll just say a little bit about what those three books are about. So the first about Islam, and I'll be focusing on what is called the universal verses of the Quran, focusing on what is it about the Quran that, as Rumi says, that splashed in the heart of Rumi and other mystics. So for example, Rumi, you might not know, almost all of his poetry is about the deeper inner teachings of the Quran. Rumi would utter, "I'm a slave of the Quran. I am dust on the path of Muhammad." Then you might know this other Islamic poet who's become popular in America. He's the most favorite famous poet in Persia, 14th century, Hafiz or Hafiz. Does that ring a bell? Hafiz? Now, that's not his name. His name is Muhammad Shamsuddin. But Hafiz was so enamored of the Quran, he memorized the Quran from beginning to end. And in Islam, anyone who has memorized the Quran entirely is given a title. And the title is Hafiz, which means one who has memorized the Quran. It literally means the preserver. Then you might not have heard of this 8th, 9th century most beloved female sage in Islam named Rabia. And Rabia used to spend countless nights just meditating on the Quran. And I should quickly add here, one point that I and the Interfaith Amigos, we make whenever we travel the country, we say that every holy book, whether it's the Christian scripture or the Jewish scriptures or the Hindu, Buddhist sutras, whatever, they have two kinds of verses. One is particular and one is universal. Particular verses in any holy book are in desperate need of historical and textual context. Universal verses are timeless, placeless, and filled with wisdom. The problem arises if I take a particular verse and advocate that as a universal verse. Or as today, a lot of people, who are against Islam or they're Islamophobic, and they have these sites that are heavily funded, they will take a particular verse from the Quran and compare that to a universal verse from the Christian scriptures as an example. And that is imbalanced. Okay, having said that, some of you are Buddhists, I take it, or studying Buddhism. So like in Buddhism, you have 4 noble truths and the 8-fold path. In Islam, we have 3 principles and 5 pillars. And I'll speak from the lens of spirituality. What is it about these 3 principles and 5 pillars that's so splashed in the hearts of Islamic mystics? So the first principle in Islam is Islam itself. And what does Islam mean literally? Islam means to surrender in peace. But the question is, what are you surrendering? And the Quran suggests what you're surrendering is your attachment to your nafs. And what is nafs? That's an Arabic term. It means your ego. So the entirety of the word Islam in a spiritual sense is about surrendering in peace your attachment to your ego. And that's a lifelong work. In practical terms, it is about making the effort every hour, every day, every week, every month to bring divinity and not the ego in the center of your life. Let me put it in a practical way. When I was young, my teachers told me, meditate on this insight. This is from the East. Whosever approval you seek, you become their prisoner. Nothing to do with good or bad. It's a law of the created world. Whosever approval you seek, you become their prisoner. So I was asked to meditate on that, like a Buddhist koan, for days and weeks. And when my parents, who were my teachers, they felt I understood a little bit of this insight, whosever approval you seek, you become their prisoner, then they gave that Sufi answer to that. Therefore, choose your jailers with care and deliberation. That's the key to life. Choose your jailers with care and deliberation. And that, in a sense, is a practical, you might say, application of the word Islam. So let me tell you some poetry. I love Rumi poetry. One reason is because my parents were diplomats, and we were posted to both Turkey and Iran, where Rumi is studied with great devotion. So I was given verses of the Qur'an and corresponding verses from Rumi to study that in tandem. So when my teachers talked about Islam, about what is called this divine exchange, exchanging in place of the ego divinity, Rumi says, for example, to encourage me or Muslims, where will you find a customer like God? Where will you find a customer like God who pays in gold? Who, Jamal, accepts your counterfeit coins? Who accepts your counterfeit coins? Who buys your dirty, shabby bag of goods? Who buys your dirty, shabby bag of goods and in return gives a spiritual spring so delicious, and in return gives a spiritual spring so delicious that even sugar is jealous of its sweetness. So just to encourage you, where will you find a customer like God who pays in gold, who accepts your counterfeit coins, buys your dirty, shabby bag of goods, and in return gives a spiritual spring so delicious that even sugar is jealous of its sweetness? Rumi goes on, therefore, for God's sake, for your sake, sell and buy at once. Sell and buy at once. Where will you find a market like this? Where will you find a market like this? For one weak breath, the divine breath. For one little seed, the entire rose garden. So that's the first principle of Islam, Islam itself, surrender. Surrender your attachment to your ego. What is the second principle? It's called Iman. Iman means faith, building faith. What the mystics have loved about the Quran is, the Quran says, faith means you have to work within yourself to have this faith emerge from within. The mystics say the work is about moving from borrowed, I'm quoting, borrowed certainty to an inner knowing. That is faith, moving through your own life experiences, learning from mistakes, building faith from borrowed certainty to an inner knowing. And the Quran says there are 3 stages of building faith. The first stage is based on hearsay. That's borrowed certainty, somebody else's certainty. And that's okay. It's borrowed, it's based on hearsay. The second one is called exploration. You explore life. Grow from mistakes, grow from life experiences. You're mindful, you witness, you participate in the bazaar of life. And then the third stage is something emerges from within. An inner knowing. An inner knowing. But it takes time, it takes struggle, it takes participation in the bazaar of life. It comes from what Buddhists would call mindfulness, expanding your mind and heart. You know, I'm a Bengali, and there's a Bengali poet, Tagore, who was the first Asian to win the Nobel Prize in Literature. So he says, what is faith? He says, faith is the bird that sings in the dark, knowing that dawn is coming. Faith is the bird that sings in the dark, knowing that dawn is coming. So that was a second principle of Islam. And what and that is faith. And the Quran says, can you have faith in 5 things? In God, or call it universal intelligence. Number 2 is angels. Number 3 is all the holy books before Muhammad. Honoring them, all the holy books, all the prophets. That's number 4. And number 5 is becoming aware there is a day of accountability. You're accountable for your deeds on earth. So I repeat, that was the principle number 2. Principle number 3 is something called Ihsan, which means, can you make yourself beautiful? And this is really about something which is emphasized again and again and again in Islamic spirituality, what is called doing the essential inner inconvenient work. The inner inconvenient work. I'd rather get a lot of degrees and tell you how to do that, but not do it myself. And, this is very emphasized in all the traditions. Like, for example, my teachers told me about the Buddha, peace be upon him, that his last few words were, be a lamp unto yourself, work out your salvation with diligence. And this is very Islamic. You've got to do the inner inconvenient work. I'm not saying Muslims do it. I'm not saying non-Muslims do it, because it's difficult. So someone asked the Prophet Muhammad, what is this work about? And Prophet Muhammad said 3 things. One is, know thyself, and you shall know thy sustainer. Know thyself, and you shall know thy sustainer. The second thing he said was, die before you die. Die before you die. Die to your all that is false within you in your lifetime before you die a physical death. And the third thing, which all Islamic mystics emphasize again and again, open your heart. Whatever that means to you. The heart is mentioned 132 times in the Quran. Open your heart. I'll put it in a poetic way. Rumi says, Jamal, open the window of your heart. The moon will kiss you only through the window. Jamal, be silent. You're talking too much. Be silent. Open the window of your heart. The moon will kiss you only through the window. The radiance of the moon fills the east and west. The radiance of the moon fills the east and west. But of what use is it if the window of the heart is closed? So there are 2 parts to becoming what the mystics call Insan Kamil, which means a more perfected, a more complete, a more developed human being. And what are those 2 parts? transforming the ego from a commanding master into a personal assistant through compassionate self-witnessing, through continuous effort, transforming the ego from a commanding master into a personal assistant. And the Quran gives 3 main stages. It basically boils down to compassionate self-witnessing. Like, if I may use a term from Hinduism, in the Hindu scriptures say, we are like 2 birds. We're like 2 birds on the branch of a tree. We're like 2 birds on the same branch. One bird is pecking away at the fruit. The fruit could be sweet, the fruit could be bitter. That's life. But I'm also the other bird on the same branch, just witnessing, compassionately witnessing. So through compassionate self-witnessing, diminishing my ego traits, and expanding the divine attributes. So in Islamic mysticism, there are a lot of stories. Brother Jonas, he showed that book, Sacred Laughter of the Sufis. There is a fictional character in Islam called the Mullah. He's fictional, and he's like a village idiot and a sage rolled into one. And he loves to laugh at himself. And by laughing at himself, he invites us to lovingly look at ourselves and to realize if we have flaws, which we have, which is why we are here on planet Earth, to transform, transform our ego, is just our personality. We are more than that. We are also our divine spark, our Buddha nature, Allah nature, Krishna nature, Christ nature. But to be able to connect with our divine spark, we have to transform the ego, go beyond the ego. And that's our one half of our work on planet Earth, the Islamic mystics will say. And what is the other half? To be of service to God's creation. So let me tell you 1 or 2 stories to make us aware of our foibles in a loving, compassionate way. So one of our favorite stories, when I say our, I mean the Interfaith Amigos, whenever we travel, we tell this story, is about becoming aware of the patterns we are stuck in. Stuck patterns. Where we blame others, we blame life, but forget to look at ourselves. So what is the story? The mullah goes to work. At lunchtime, opens his lunch pail box. What does he find? A cheese sandwich. 2nd day, 3rd day, 4th day, it's always a lousy cheese sandwich. On the 10th day, he keeps on complaining, I'm getting sick and tired of this lousy cheese sandwich. So his puzzled co-worker said, Mullah, why don't you ask your wife, be persuasive, ask your wife to make you a different kind of sandwich. What does the mullah say? I'm not married. Who makes them? I do. So we are in this stuck pattern, blaming everybody. And how will we get out of it unless we allow ourselves to look at ourselves lovingly, compassionately? Let me just give you one more. And this one is about how we are so slavishly dependent on authorities, experts, pundits. The story is that the mullah is gravely ill. And everybody is crying, and the wife particularly is lamenting and crying. And now in comes the authority, the expert, the pundit. Who is this? The allopathic medical doctor who examines the mullah at length, turns to the mullah's wife and says, I'm so sorry, madam. Only Allah is immortal. Your husband is dead. His soul has flown to the bosom of God, and he's continuing, but the mullah is alive and is feebly saying, I'm alive, I'm alive, I'm alive, I'm alive. And what does the wife say? Quiet, don't argue with the doctor. It's about our slavish dependence. Like, my teachers told me of this Buddhist saying, when you hear a bird in song, do you have the need to ask it for its credentials? So the third principle is becoming a more complete human being, transforming your ego and opening up your heart. The metaphor is purify your heart. I mean, the Quran says, purify your heart. Purify. So the metaphor is polish your heart. That's why in Sufis will go, if you have seen the whirling dervishes, they go around like this, whirling dervishes, and then from time to time they go like this. It's about polishing the heart, purifying the heart, because the Quran says, bring to God a sound, polished heart. Jamal, everything you have is from God. Everything you have is from God. What can you offer God? The Quran says, bring to God a sound, beautiful heart. Bring to God a polished heart, so Allah's face is reflected in that. Bring to God a polished heart, so God's face is reflected in that. And the Quran says, open your heart. And there is another way to open the heart, which is critical, we avoid. It is to embrace not only your 10,000 joys of life, but also your 10,000 sorrows of life. The Quran says all feelings come from God, not just joy, delight, happiness, contentment, but also pain, sadness, difficulties. It's a world of duality. It's a world of opposites, says the Quran. You're bound to, like Buddhists would say, the Quran says the same thing. You are going to experience suffering. And the Quran suggests this will grow something in you. And the mystics are very quick to point out that don't run towards pain and suffering, just don't run away from them. Don't run towards pain and suffering, just don't run away from them. So another way to open up the heart is to embrace all those difficult feelings and allow the heart to break. And there's a complete many-step process that Islamic mystics have come up with. For example, there is a technique called sacred holding. 7-step, 8-step process where you embrace and not push it out, but bring in your difficult feelings. And by bringing them in, by acknowledging them, by healing them, by integrating them, those difficult feelings makes me a more complete human being. My anger gets transformed into an inner enthusiasm. My fear into greater mindfulness. My sadness into a greater empathy. Carl Jung, who studied many Eastern traditions, he would say, his famous words are, will you have the courage and grace to kiss the demons and dragons within you? That is how they turn into a prince or princess. So, okay, so that was the third one. So now I'm watching my time. I better speak fast. Now I come to the 5 principles. The 5 pillars of Islam. I talked about the 3 principles of Islam and now the 5 pillars. So very quickly, the first pillar of Islam is La ilaha illallah. There is no God but God. It's a simple verse. La ilaha illallah. Probably one of the most popular mantras. Like in Buddhism, Om Mane Padme Hum, or in Christianity, Jesus, I love you. In Islam, it's La ilaha illallah. La ilaha illallah. La ilaha illallah. Simple words. Literally, there is no God but God. You might say via negativa, there is no God, and via positiva, but only God. So to explain that, the Quran has verses. So let me just quote some verses. The Quran says, if all the trees in the universe became pens, and all the 7 oceans became ink, and you began to write the mysteries of God, and they were depleted, and you replenished them, you wouldn't come close even to describing a fraction of the fraction of the fraction of the fraction of God's mysteries. Which is why, by the way, Rumi never wrote. Rumi would read some verses of the Quran or hear something else. He would go into a trance and words would just come out of him. And his followers or his family would write them down. And the collection of that is Rumi poetry. And that's how the Quran was also actually written. The Prophet would go into a trance and utter, and his family and followers would write them down. So about this verse, it is about mystery. Rumi goes into a trance and he comes out with this verse: sell your cleverness and buy bewilderment. Sell your cleverness and buy bewilderment. Okay, let me just give 1 or 2 more verses from the Quran. Another verse from the Quran says, Allah is closer to you than your jugular vein. Allah is closer to you than your jugular vein. So we all have access to this higher intelligence. You know, there's a story of Rabia. I mentioned that female 8th, 9th century female sage, and she was remarkable. She would run through the streets of Basra. You know, she's from Iraq, and carrying a torch of fire and a pail of water. She loved metaphors. They would say, what is this? Are you running through the streets with a torch of fire and a pail of water? She would say, yes, with this torch of fire, I'm going to burn all those pleasures of heaven. With this pail of water, I'm going to quench all the fires of hell. Is this a way to live? She would say. Is this a way to live? To lust for the pleasures of heaven? Or to live in dread of the fires of hell? Live a life where you live for the sake of loving God, loving infinite intelligence. So, you know, she would also may have utterances. She would pray, oh God, if I worship you for love of heaven, please bar me, stop me from its gates. If I love you for fear of hell, burn me in hell. But if I worship you for your sake, please begrudge me not your everlasting beauty. Please begrudge me not your everlasting love and beauty. So, God is closer to us than our jugular vein. And the story I really wanted to say was, besides living a life where you live for the sake of God, the other story is she was walking the streets of Basra and she saw this famous Islamic spiritual teacher who was telling his adoring students, Allah is so compassionate, Allah is so loving. All you have to do is knock on Allah's door again and again and again and again and again. And because God is so compassionate, one day God's door will open. God will open his door. And Rabia said, dear brother, when was the door ever closed? And the teacher gets up and bows to her. Because Allah is closer to you than your jugular vein. We all have access to God. Let me just give you one more verse, which is a very popular one, but which has many, many levels of meaning. I'll just give you one level of meaning. The verse in the Quran says, every so where you turn is the face of Allah. Every so where you turn is the face of Allah. I'll give you two meanings, because I'll give you one what Rumi talks about in some depth. And I repeat, every so where you turn is the face of Allah. So someone asked Rumi, are you telling me that the devil, Satan, is also the face of Allah? And what did Rumi say? Yes, but Allah does not approve of the devil, of Satan. They said, what do you mean? Explain. It doesn't make sense. So Rumi says it's like this. Ponder on this. A medical doctor, for his or her livelihood, needs for people to fall sick. But does the doctor approve of them suffering? No. A baker needs for his or her livelihood for people to become hungry. But does the baker approve of them starving? No. You see, everything is a mystery. In the Quran, Satan says to God, by your power, by your glory, I shall waylay humanity. By your power, by your glory, I shall waylay humanity. And Rumi says, it's a world of opposites. We have the angelic spirit, we have Allah's breath in us, but we also have what the Quran calls the slinking whisperer. And Rumi says, without these two opposing forces, how could they be built in you? These divine attributes of love, compassion, patience, self-restraint, capacity to forgive. We need these opposites to grow, to mature spiritually. Okay, I better move even faster now. So that was the first pillar. The second pillar is prayer. Have you seen Muslims pray? They'll go like this. They'll bow, they'll prostrate on the floor. And it's all about the prayer to let go of your ego so that you become a more complete human being. What are Muslims saying as they are praying? They're simply praising God and thanking God. As they bow down and as they prostrate, they're letting go of their ego. As they sit up or they stand up, is symbolically is what remains of the human being when you have done the work of letting go as best as possible your attachment to your ego. So let me just give this one verse. One prostration of prayer to God, one prostration of prayer to God liberates you from 1,000 prostrations to your ego. This is a verse from Islamic mysticism. One prostration of prayer to God liberates you, frees you from 1,000 prostrations to your ego. You know, we have in our community a female congregant who is an Episcopalian priest who made news all over the world because she also became a Muslim without giving up her Christianity. She was both a Muslim and a Christian. And when I asked her, what really made you a Muslim? She said, you know, my mother was dying And I just tried this Islamic prayer of bowing and prostrating, surrendering to God. And she said, I felt a peace I've never felt, number one. And number two, every time I prostrated to God, I felt I was on a divine date with God. And that just touched my heart. So that's prayer. So that was pillar number two. Pillar number three is service. In the Quran, every time there's a verse on prayer, it is immediately followed by a verse on service. So let me just quote Rumi, who says, what is service? He says, be a lamp, a lifeboat, or a ladder to others. Be a lamp, a lifeboat, or a ladder to others. I want to quote that Bengali poet again, Tagore, who says about service, I slept and dreamt life was joy. I slept and dreamt life was joy. I awoke and found life was service. I served and behold, service was joy. Okay, fourth one is Ramadan, fasting in a particular month. That's the 9th month of the Islamic lunar calendar. And why do Muslims fast in that month? Because it was in that month, on a particular day in that month, when Prophet Muhammad had his extraordinary mystical experience when he was meditating in the cave in Mecca in the year 610 CE, Angel Gabriel appeared. And the very first verses of the Quran descended upon Prophet Muhammad. It's a long story. And to express gratitude for the first verses of the Quran that were descended to Prophet Muhammad and to humanity, Muslims will fast as a gesture of gratitude for the first verses of the Quran. That's why they purify themselves in that entire month. Last one is Hajj, which is pilgrimage. It's really about building community, Sangha. We all need community. And I end with that. Prophet Rumi says, this is what community is. Please come out of the circle of time and enter the circle of love. And he says, a wall standing alone is useless. A wall standing alone is useless. Add to it other walls, it can support a roof, even a granary. Only when ink joins with a pen can the blank paper say something. We all need community. Okay, I'll stop there. Brother Jonas, I don't have no idea how much time I have. As always, I overdo it. So if there's time for questions, I'll be happy to take questions. Otherwise, please proceed with your program.
Oh my. Well, overflowing with love.
Oh, thank you, brother.
And time overflows into eternity. No, this is beautiful. It's so good to be with you again, and my heart warms as I listen to you. We've learned something about your life, where you come from, what you've given your life to, and there are so many beautiful, delicate connections between your spirituality, your spiritual life, and mine, almost to the point where I see no difference. And it's so beautiful. And many of the themes that you've talked about are things that we've talked about in our Sangha, in our community called the Empty Bell. And I love what you said there toward the end, out of the circle of time and into the circle of love. Yes. Or into the circle of eternity. Everything passes, but yes, what lasts? Eternity is never passes. And
so true. Yes.
Yeah, and the scent of eternity is love.
Absolutely. Yes. But I have to interrupt and say quickly Rumi's insight about love. Rumi says, love is in every religion. Love is in every religion, but love has no religion.
Yes, that sounds right. Yeah. So, Brother Jamal, let's see what's being stirred in people's hearts this morning. Would anyone like to? And I didn't ring the bell, but everything passes. The bell passes, but but we're here. So would anyone like to ask a question?
And I promise to be short, brief.
Yes.
Think.
Yeah. Okay, good. Because we have about 20, 30 minutes and that to share. As you listen to Brother Jamal, what stirs in you?
What splashes in your heart, Rumi would say, or what perfumes your heart?
There you go. Yeah, Duncan.
Yes, Duncan, please.
Jamal, it's lovely to see you again. I was sat in your circle in Seattle. So one of the things I was aware of then, and I was certainly reminded of it now, is your enthusiasm.
Oh, thank you.
And it raises a question for me around what might be referred to as sort of spiritual enthusiasm, because I think many people, particularly nowadays, are shy spiritually, and that it takes a lot to step forward to say, actually, no, I have a spiritual practice. I am a spiritual being. There's something about that seems to be acknowledging that you're a little crazy.
Yeah.
And I just wonder if you could speak to that, because you seem to be without any reserve about your spirituality, and I so appreciate that.
Thank you, Brother Duncan. I think one reason is, I would say give two reasons among many others. One is I've really taken to heart that insight that whosever approval you seek, you become their prisoner. Therefore, choose your jailers with care and deliberation. So I feel my connection really is with divinity. And of course, I must be careful not to hurt anybody. So I've learned not to be too cowed down and slavishly seek other people's approval in a slavish way. I must be sensitive, but not be slavish about that. And the other reason, Brother Duncan, is that I really believe what Hafiz says. Hafiz, he has this wonderful statement, insight, this great sage. Hafiz says, what is this love and laughter bubbling up from within you? He says, listen to my answer. Is the sound of a soul waking up. And then he goes on to say, God wants to see more laughter and playfulness in your eyes. God wants to see more laughter and playfulness in your eyes, for that is your greatest witness to God. So from an early age, I've learned to laugh a lot and believe that it is a path to what Brother Jonas was saying, to eternity, because the truth is, everything is so absurdly funny. We have no idea who we are, where we have come from. I'm at that stage of my life. I've begun to think about death in a more knowledge of the heart way, and I sometimes burst out laughing. I have no idea where I'm going when I die. And it's so ridiculous, how little we know, and yet how seriously we take ourselves in that. And that makes me laugh a lot and not worry too much about what other people think. But thank you for that beautiful question, Brother Duncan. Yes, Sister Anne, please.
This might be a little off your topic, but I have curiosity about the overlap between Sufism, as you've described it, and the actual practice of Islam.
Yes.
I mean, you talk about the 5 pillars, which of course is very much part of the day-to-day practice of being a Muslim. Do all Sufis adhere to that, or is it a much more free-thinking, freewheeling type of practice? I'm interested in your perspective on that.
Yes, very good. I should quickly thank you. That's a very beautiful, very necessary question. I would say one of the main characteristics of Sufis is they're very flexible. And sometimes they're blamed for being overly flexible. And what is that famous statement about flexibility? The Sufis say, blessed are the flexible, for they will never be bent out of shape. Blessed are the flexible, for they will never be bent out of shape. But Sister Anne, there's a great question because there's a lot of confusion. Who are the Sufis? Like many people tell me, Jamal, you're such a nice guy. That's because you're not a Muslim. You're a Sufi. So who is a Sufi? There's a total misunderstanding about Sufism and who Sufis are. So let me start from the beginning. Just like Christianity, for example, has two main denominations, the Catholics and Protestants. In Islam, the two main denominations are Sunni and Shia. 85% of the world's Muslims are Sunni, 15% are Shia. So who are the Sufis? Sufis technically are Muslims who can be Sunnis or Shia, but they have a heartfelt aspiration not to get enmeshed into the, what do you say in English, the P's and T's and the minute details of the theology of the religion. They aspire to live the spirit of the tradition. That's who a Sufi is. It's a heartfelt aspiration to live the spirit of the tradition. So I'll give an example. A conservative Muslim might say, Jamal, if you do not do your obligatory 5 prayers, if you do not every day do your 5 obligatory prayers, you will burn in hell. Scalding water and fires of hell. That's a conservative Muslim. A Sufi, also a Muslim, will say, Jamal, when you pray, it is as if you're attending a celestial banquet. And when you don't pray, you're missing out on the feast. And that is your punishment. That's a different approach. But Anne, the reason I'm telling you it's a very good question is there's a lot of confusion. But wait a minute. I know somebody who is a Christian and he's a Sufi. He or she is not a Muslim. For example, in America, most of the Sufi leaders are Jews. They're called Jufis, Jews and Sufis. So the question is, do you have to be a Muslim to be a Sufi? Now, Sufis never answer directly. They'll just tell you a story. But the point is, the Sufis will say, it's come to this now. As Sufism has evolved, if you're a person who is on the path of enlightenment, it doesn't matter what your religion is, what your tradition is. You're a Sufi. Again, they will give you an example. They will say, for example, when Muslims, when they pray, and this is not something you might know, when Muslims are going like this and bowing and prostrating, they're in one particular direction, facing Mecca. But not only just facing Mecca, they're facing a square building draped in black called the Kaaba. Anybody heard of that? It's the Kaaba. It's in the Grand Mosque. It's in Mecca. It's symbolically the house of God. And every Muslim is pointing the prayer rug in the direction of the Kaaba, the symbolic house of God. Now, Sufis will say, all Muslims, they point their prayer rugs as they bow and prostrate in the direction of the Kaaba, that building draped in black in the Grand Mosque in Mecca. But what happens if your prayer rug is inside the Kaaba because you're enlightened? Your prayer rug is now symbolically, metaphorically, not just in the direction of the Kaaba, it's actually inside the Kaaba. Then does it matter in what direction you point the prayer rug? No. You're a Sufi. So the term Sufi has evolved in the West because the word Muslim, what does the word Muslim mean? It comes from Islam also. Is part of it. It means someone who is surrendered to God. And what has the person surrendered? The attachment to the ego. So for example, a verse in the Qur'an says that Abraham was not a Jew, was not of any religion, was not a Christian, was not a Jew, was not this. He was a Muslim. Not in the small term Muslim of the theology of Islam, because it is someone who has surrendered the ego. So in the Quran, Jesus, Moses, Abraham, peace be upon them, they're all called Muslims. And this really aggravates my rabbi friend, saying, you have usurped, Abraham.
And Jamal, Jesus, who is Jesus then?
Yeah, so Jesus is considered, the Quran says, Ruh Allah, Spirit of God, not Son of God, but a great prophet. A great prophet. In fact, if I read the Quran in a very objective way, and if I have to make a judgment, which we're asked not to make a judgment, I would say the most honored prophet in the Quran is actually Jesus. And why do I say that? Because the Quran says several things. The Quran says that Jesus was unlike all the other prophets because Muslims believe in the virgin birth. Same story. Angel Gabriel comes, tells Mary is forlorn, and she retreats to this lonely place and gives birth to Jesus. In fact, there is an entire chapter in the Quran on Mary, chapter 19, called Maryam. There's more about Mary in the Quran than all the Christian scriptures put together. Many Muslim women are called Maryam. Many Muslim men are called Isa, Jesus. So what makes Jesus very distinctive in the Quran? Number one, he's unlike all the other prophets. He was not born in the normal biological way. It was virgin birth. That's number one. Number two, the Quran says every human being has the divine spark. Every human being is noble, is called fitra. But out of a divine design, God has also put in every single human being the slinking whisperer, so they might grow from this tension. But then Prophet Muhammad said there were two people, he said to his community, who never had the slinking whisperer. Who are they? Who are they? Who are these two people? Mary and Jesus. And then people got very concerned. How about you, Muhammad? But you have the slinking whisper inside your heart. He said, yes, but don't worry. And he said, why shouldn't we worry? He said, because I made the devil a Muslim. Transform the devil. But neither Mary nor Jesus ever had the slinking whisperer. So very unique human beings. The third point, which was also utterly unique, is that every prophet dies. But Jesus, peace be upon him, says the Quran never died. Really? So what happened to Jesus? The Quran says, when Jesus felt so afflicted, so pained because of what people did to him, he was in deep anguish, and God, out of compassion, felt such empathy, sympathy, love for Jesus that God made Jesus rise up to him. So Jesus never died. He ascended and went to the bosom of God. Never died. And the fourth thing, I forgot, the fourth thing was, in the Islamic tradition, before the end time, before the world collapses, who comes and saves the world? It's not Muhammad, it's not Abraham, it's not Moses. Who is it? It's Jesus. So all Muslims believe the person just before the day of judgment who will come and save and create justice and mercy and love on earth, it is Jesus. So Muslims have an extraordinary love for Jesus as a prophet, which is why when Muslims experience Islamophobia, they get confused, not because they're called a terrorist or this or that. They get very confused about, wow, we love Jesus so much, and these are people who are followers of Jesus. How come they hate us? Because we have such deep love for Jesus, and the love is very genuine for not only Jesus but also for Mary. So actually, if anybody casts aspersion on Jesus or Mary, you'll always find historically the first ones to object are actually Muslims. And sometimes, unfortunately, they get violent about that.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much.
So let's see, I'm checking time, Jamal.
Yes, please.
Brother, and it's, let's see, 9:38 here.
Yes.
So maybe we have 10 more minutes. So maybe we can have a couple more questions or observations,
Sure.
responses.
Please.
There's such richness here. For me, it might take a while to
Well, you know,
realize.
sorry to interrupt you, Brother Jason, but since you mentioned time, let me just tell you a quick story about the Mullah about time. It's very relevant. You know, the Mullah goes to London, but the Mullah travels all over the world, goes to London Museum. And here's this very pompous professor who's the guide who says, this artifact is 5,000 years old. And the Mullah raises his hand, excuse me, sir, it's 5,004 years old. And the guide is a little bit annoyed. He goes to another artifact, but it doesn't say anything. This is 10,000 years old. Excuse me, sir, it's 10,004 years old. And now the guide is pretty upset. Happens the third time. This is 50,000 years old. Excuse me, it's 50,004 years old. And now the professor cannot contain himself. Says, sir, you have a turban, you have a beard, which tells me you come from the mysterious East. But how can you be so laser precise about these dates? Simple, says the Mullah. I was here 4 years ago. At that time, you mentioned those dates. So what is this about? It has many levels of meaning. It's later than you think. So time is really precious. It's later than you think.
Yes, beautiful. Yeah. Thank you. And I think David had a question or
yes.
I did. Jamal, thank you so much for joining us this morning. It's been wonderful.
Thank you.
It's a fire hose of information, of inspiration, and I feel like I've learned a lot. And there's one thing I do want to ask you about, which has come up. It's the word ego.
Yes.
So you say, one prostration in prayer to God is
liberates you from 1,000 prostrations. Yes.
To your ego.
Yes.
So what precisely do you mean by ego?
Yeah, good question. No one knows really what the ego is. And in fact, the word nafs in the Quran stands both for ego and the soul, which is timeless, placeless, and is a divine spark of God. But so the way it was explained to me is no one knows what the ego is. And of course, there are many, many theories about that from Freud and all the different psychologists. But it's really about the excessive focus on I, me. It's that slinking whisperer vibration energy, which makes me go astray and focus so much on myself, I forget who I am, where I've come from, and where I'm going. And my work is to make that divine exchange. In terms of a definition, David, I don't have a definition for ego. And we're all confused about it. And the biggest confusion is, why would God give us an ego? And like Rumi says, he says, I don't understand this. God is so all-powerful, all-compassionate. He could have sent the most advanced prophets and prophetess, female prophets on earth, but he chose to send people with egos on planet Earth. Why? Half-baked people like us. So there is a purpose to it, but we don't know what the purpose is. Now, a lot of Sufis take comfort in a revelation that came to the Prophet Muhammad, where God says to each one of us, "O beloved one, I was a secret treasure. I was a secret treasure, and I longed to be known. And so I created you and the worlds, visible and invisible." So in a sense, God gave us that ego so we might transform it and become more God or goddess-like. And that fulfills our purpose for being here. But what ego is and why we have to transform it, none of us know.
It points to a deeper question, which is, what is it which would give up the ego? And it gets very subtle because there's spiritual egos.
Yes, yes.
And it's hard to tell when sometimes you are operating from true inspiration,
Yes.
or if you're operating from the ego as spiritual advisor.
Absolutely.
It's very difficult. And when you get rid of the ego, what's left?
Absolutely. In fact, Rumi has, or Islamic mystics have a insight about, they say, it's not about, they say, you misunderstand, Jamal, when the spiritual teachers talk about annihilating the ego. You've heard that, David? They say about you have
Yes.
to annihilate the ego. Rumi particularly has a lot of insight. He says, when someone says, a master says, a Sufi teacher says, it's important to annihilate the ego, please understand, we need the ego to function, to exist. And Rumi gives an example. In those days, no electricity. He says, we need the flame of the candle to find our way in the dark. That's the ego, says Rumi. We need the flame of the candle to find our way in the dark. But now, as you make the journey, and because you're getting enlightened, you come into the land of the sun, the glorious, luminous, radiant sun. In that sense, when you come in that presence of the radiant sun, the flame of the candle is annihilated. But it still exists, says Rumi. If you take a cloth, put it to the flame of the candle, that cloth will burn. It still exists. But in that metaphorical sense, because of the radiance of the sun, it is annihilated.
It's beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you, David.
You're reminding me of Marguerite Porete. Everyone knows is one of my favorite medieval mystics, and she said, and in fact, Jamal, maybe I mentioned this to you. I don't know. I just finished a book, and the title of the book is "My Dear Far Nearness," which is a name for God from Marguerite Porete, 13th century. And she said, in this experience of the flame disappearing into the sun, she said, "I am nothing." And when she said, "I am nothing," it so upset the religious authorities that they tried to destroy her nothingness. They burned her at the stake in 1310. Yeah, it was just such a the authorities felt that she was annihilating the tradition.
What a beautiful story. Because it reminds me of the Islamic story of Al-Hallaj, who's a very, very famous Sufi master who did so much of inner work, and he realized a divine spark is within him. And he said, "Oh, I am God." His famous words are "Ana al-Haq," meaning I am the truth, I am the truth. But it was a statement, it was a declaration, it was a burst of the deepest humility, as Sufi masters now point out, compared to the Pharaoh, who's mentioned in the Qur'an, who said, "I am your Lord, I am your Lord, worship me." And Al-Hallaj said, "I am the truth, I am the truth." And for this, he also was crucified, by the way, by the authorities of his time, because they just couldn't stand it. Although the mystics said, he is speaking the truth. You see, there's a wonder, I'll end with this. There's a wonderful statement the Prophet Muhammad made. He said, "Ana huwa wa huwa ana, ghaira ana anna wa huwa huwa." Prophet Muhammad said, and this is sacrilegious, he said, "I am God, and God is I, except that I am I, and God is God." And that makes him acceptable, you see. I am God, and God is I, except that I am I, and God is God.
Yes, and we've talked about this I, pronoun I, that's mentioned by Moses when he's struggling with God, and God's telling him to free the people, and he says, "I can't do it, I can't do it." "Okay, well, I'll go to the people and tell them you want them to be free, but who are you?" he says to God. And God says, "I am who am I." That I is the I that you hear Jesus speak in the Gospels, I think.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you.
That's the I of the nothing of God, I guess.
Yes. So in a sense, I'm everything and I'm nothing.
Yes, both.
In fact, Sufi masters said that's the real definition of humility, authentic humility. that I am nothing, but I'm also everything. I'm also a divine spark within me. And just bowing to this contradiction, to this, not so much contradiction, but this mystery of paradox makes me humble. Humble in a very regal way.
Yes. Yes. You have to be careful who to say this to, too, right? Like Marguerite and this other fellow who was executed for what, and Jesus, the religious authorities said in the Gospels, they say, he says he's God. When I think the I he was using was not his ego I. So it can be a very tricky, dangerous territory.
And that's what, Brother Jonas, that's what some of the masters said, that Al-Hallaj, when he was executed, they said, they said, we wish he was more discerning. What he said was the truth, but not everybody's ready for that truth.
Yes.
And so a real master, and he was a real master, Al-Hallaj is considered a real master, but he said he got so exuberant, excited by the discovery that within me is a divine spark, he just could not contain himself. See? I am the truth, I am the truth, I am the truth. He just could not contain that astonishing realization. But his own teacher said, I wish he was more discerning.
Yes, yes. Well, Brother Jamal, just be careful. Don't walk out into the streets of Seattle saying you're the spark, okay?
I promise to keep my lips sealed. Yes, I am just Jamal, and I am.
Just
thank
a
you
humble
so much.
servant, humble servant. Well, thank you so much for being with us. God bless you, and we'll see you again, I hope, in either in Seattle or here.
Yes, look forward to that, and God bless. And I just say, like Rumi would say, I'm so grateful for being in these rectangles of love. Thank you, my dear friends.
Thank you. And if anyone wants to stay afterwards after Jamal leaves, please hang in there and we'll have a little discussion. Thank you,
Take
Jamal.
care. God bless
your family.
Thank you. Love to you, all of you. Bye-bye.
Bye. So those of you who are still here, you're here, and I'm here. And the I, the great I that has no root in linear time is here. So much fun for me to be with him. What do you think? You have to unmute whoever wants to speak.
I am really glad that was recorded because I felt like that was a banquet, and I'm going to watch it again and write some things down, but I just wanted to be so present in it. And then I just felt like, whew, I don't know, like I'd been in a waterfall. So I'm really glad that you have recorded it and that you'll post it so we can listen to it again. What an exuberant spirit he is. And at that hour of the morning for him, that is, I guess I could aspire to that, but I doubt it'll ever happen. So I just loved it. What a great way to start the day.
Yeah.
Yes, and I really enjoyed the way he linked all the largest traditions in the world: Judaism, Christianity, Islam, some Buddhism, and so on. I just thought that was amazing, the way he could flow between them. And that's really my mindset. Yeah, I was looking up at my books on Buddha and on Islam, on the I Ching and the Imitation of Christ and Idris Shah and Thomas Merton, all the things I've read in my own life. And it really is that linking of them all together. That's a very helpful way he did it.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's such an example of why we keep hopeful in the face of tremendous fear and division, and it's just that the truth, the unity, the way we're all part of the same story. I just kept thinking, why in heaven's name have we gotten so divided, even within our own tradition? But I'm just it was a great boost for hopefulness for me, and to somehow be a part of that, I was thinking, I'm a Sufi Christian, why the heck not?
A Suju Boo.
Yeah.
I feel just awash in love and inspiration. It's a feeling throughout my body of it's as though he is a candle and he leaned over and lit or ignited in a brighter way the light within me this morning. I'm just feeling really grateful. It's extraordinary.
I guess what struck me about, thanks Jonas for bringing him to us. That was just great. And when I was listening to him and learning so much, but I thought, gee, I've been taking my spirituality a little bit too seriously, and it just hasn't been much fun, because I'm trying too hard. I'm trying too hard. And he just reminded me that we really don't have to do that. We don't have to take ourselves too seriously, because it's God who works through us. And that's part of the letting go. I've had those experiences, but lately, I guess I've just been caught up in the way of the world and all the news and just, progress. And that's what I just so enjoyed about him. I wish he could be on corporate news. That's what we need. We need to go to the White House, because it was just so inspiring. And I just so related to it. And there's another community that I'm in, and they also emphasize not to take yourself so seriously, but it's difficult. It's hard because of the ego, I guess, the ego. So I enjoyed the way he talked about the ego and the preoccupation with self. So have to, hopefully I'll remember, and I'm going to listen to it again, but that was just great. Thank you. Yeah. Thanks. I can't wait to read your book.
I know, me too. I got an advance copy last week, and I won't get more books for another 2 weeks. And my daughter came to visit, and I showed her the book, and it was on the peninsula in the kitchen. And then she took it, and I was like, "What happened to my book? It's my only book. 15 years of my life. Where's my book?" The I Me Mind came out, and then I called her, and she said, "Oh my God, I thought you gave me that book as a present." And then I felt, a flash of guilt, I guess. And I said, "Well, I love you, and you deserve a signed book. I'm going to bring you a signed book. And you can give me that one back, and then we're all good again." Yeah. There's so much of there's a lot of Brother Jamal in my book too, because he's really, we spent about 4 or 5 days together, and got very close. And I visited him, like Duncan. I visited him in Seattle and his community, and I really trust him as someone he's more enthusiastic than I am, and he's okay with the absurdity of life being fun and all that. And I tend to be a little more melancholy, but we're all different. We got so many types, Enneagrams and everything else. But I do love him, and I want to spend more time with him.
Yeah. Thank you, Jonas.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Beautiful morning.
So long, everyone.
Wonderful seeing everybody.
Yeah.
It's a great morning.
Yeah. Thank you. Let's keep going forward into the sun.
Absolutely.
Laughing more.
Yes, laughing more. There you go.
This is the thing about the spiritual life. If it's no fun, it's no good.
Yeah.
If there's no fun, there's no point in it.
Yeah.
I've come to realize meditation has got to feel good.
Yeah. Thank you. That's so true. Okay. Well, we'll go on laughing together.